This video is on how to clean the Sig Sauer MPX. This one is the Copperhead variant. This video is meant for new MPX owners. I know everyone has a different way of doing things, including myself, so for the purposes of this video, I'm going to clean this gun right along the lines of Sig Sauer's recommendations, with the exception of the bore snake. They actually do not mention a bore snake anywhere in their manual, but I'm going to use one just to be extra thorough. Let's get started. You'll need a few things. CLP, don't worry about the brand, just use whatever you have or whatever your favorite CLP is. A cleaning rod, nylon brush, 9mm size bore brush, a patch holder, and cleaning patches. If you want to take the extra step and make sure your barrel is extra clean, you can use a bore snake. I highly recommend it. On the MPX, I find a brass punch to be very handy. If you don't have a brass punch, you can use the end of an Allen wrench or a similar tool. But if you can, I'd stick with a brass punch just so you don't scratch up your shit. The MPX has ambidextrous mag release buttons. You have one on the left here, and one on the right. Make sure your weapon is clear and safe, point in a safe direction, press the magazine release button, remove the magazine, pull the charging handle a few times. If there's any ammo inside, it's going to eject at this point. Hold the bolt open by pressing the bolt catch lever right there. Pull the charging handle back as you're holding that button. Now make sure the chamber is empty. Separate the upper and lower receiver by pressing the takedown pin in the rear and the pivot pin in the front. Sometimes these pins are hard to get out, especially when the gun is new, so I use a brass punch to get it started. If you're trying to hammer out the pivot pin, there's no room for the pin to come out on the other side. That's why I use the magazine to hold it up. You don't need to hammer them all the way out. You can just get it started with the brass punch and then pull the pins out from the right side with your hand. Notice that the brace is pulled all the way out. If you have it pushed in, the upper is not going to separate from the lower. I'll show you. So just extend the brace all the way out and the upper is going to come right off. Today we're just doing a basic field strip and clean. We're not taking all of this out. It's still easy to clean even without doing a complete disassembly. Remove the bolt carrier group and charging handle from the upper receiver. Sig Sauer calls this the carriage assembly, but I'm not going to use that term. I'm going to call it bolt carrier group, or BCG for short. Look how nice this charging handle is. Remove the recoil springs from the spring rods by taking off the spring plate. Now take a second to notice how these rods look. They are not the same on both ends. That's going to mean something when it's time to put this back together. Now remove the firing pin retaining pin. Push on that side right there to get it started. After I've used the brass punch to get it started, I just grab the other end with my fingers and pull it out. Pull the firing pin out. Now that the firing pin is out, the cam pin will come right out. Now remove the bolt from the bolt carrier. Sig Sauer has this part listed as the op rod. I don't like that word at all. It doesn't make sense. I'm going to make up my own word and call it the seminiferous modulator. Anyways, take it off like so. You don't necessarily need to remove the extractor from the bolt every time you shoot it, but I'm going to go ahead and show you. I'm using a small Allen wrench to push out the extractor pin. Make sure you don't lose it. And there's some spring tension on the extractor. Just pull it out. And you can see the extractor spring right there. When you're cleaning it, be careful not to lose anything. Use the T25 wrench that it came with to take the barrel out of the upper receiver. Notice there's blue Loctite on these screws. I'm not going to reapply the blue Loctite. I haven't had a problem with barrels coming loose on any MPX I've fired so far, but just so you know, if you think you need to apply blue Loctite before you put these back in, that's where it goes. Once the screws are out, I just turn the receiver over and give it a few taps and this piece comes out. Now just pull the barrel right out, and that's as far as you need to take the upper receiver down. To take out the piston, you're going to have to remove the gas plug. To do that, I stick an Allen wrench through the hole right there and turn it. You'll have to turn it to this position here. See how it moves? Then just use the Allen wrench to pull it out. Just like that. Now that the gas plug is out, you'll see the piston exposed. Just use your punch to help get it started and it should drop right out. Spray CLP on your nylon brush, start spraying parts down with CLP, let it soak for a few minutes, then get started scrubbing. Scrub everything the best you can. The parts that are hard to reach with your nylon brush, use your Q-tip. You can also use the smaller end of your nylon brush if you have one. Just go through everything and find detail. Don't be lazy and don't try to half-ass anything. Take care of your weapon and your weapon will take care of you. Okay, when you're through scrubbing everything down, take a 9mm size bore brush and screw it onto the cleaning rod and push the brush through from chamber end to muzzle end. Now this is what I'm talking about when I say not to be lazy. Once I push the bore brush through, I don't pull the dirt right back into the barrel. I take off the bore brush, pull the rod back out, and start over, going the same way from chamber end to muzzle end. The bristles on the bore brush are meant to follow the rifling grooves, so make sure you grab it by the T-handle and not by the rod as you're pushing it through the bore. The reason is the T-handle allows the bore brush to spin freely through the rifling as you're pushing it through the bore. If the bore bristles are just going straight without turning, they're just going right over the grooves. They're not really getting inside the grooves the way they were meant to. So repeat that process a few times. Depending on how much you're shooting, probably 3 to 4 times is good with the bore brush. Then start with the cleaning patches. Put a cleaning patch over a cleaning patch holder or that pick device that I'm using. I use the pick looking device because it seems to get a better seal through the bore as I'm pushing that patch through, and it cleans it a lot faster. If you notice, I put in one patch and it comes out dirty. I spray CLP on another one, push it through, and it comes out a little less dirty. And I just keep repeating that until the patches start to come out clean. The patches are starting to come out cleaner, but that's not clean enough for me. I'm going to push a few more patches through off camera, then carry on. Take a look at the brass end of the bore snake. Make sure it says either 9mm or 38. Just drop the brass weight in from chamber end to muzzle end and pull it through. Do this 2 or 3 times. That should be good. Now I'm going to go through all the parts with a clean rag and Q-tip and wipe off any excess CLP. I'm going to leave the bolt kind of wet and make sure I leave extra CLP or dedicated lubricant on any parts that show metal on metal wear. Now look at that sexy lower receiver. That's even cleaner than it came from the factory. That's how you want all your parts to look before you reassemble. Take pride in ownership. Don't be one of those guys that claim their gun is nothing but a tool. Those that say that are the ones that treat their equipment like shit. Okay, let's reassemble. Put the bolt back in the bolt carrier. Make sure you turn the bolt to where you can reinsert the cam pin. And if you line these two dots up right here, you'll have no trouble sliding in the firing pin. When you push the firing pin in, extend the bolt, make sure the firing pin is all the way in. If it's not, when you put your retainer pin back in and you turn the bolt over, the firing pin is going to slide right out. So just make sure you push the firing pin all the way down, then put the retainer pin back in, and it should look just like that. Now reinsert the piston back into the barrel assembly. Make sure you put it in straight. I use my brass punch to kind of guide it in correctly. When you're done with that, reinstall the gas plug. Reinsert it just like this. If it doesn't go in right, just tap it with a brass punch. Now I'm going to use my Allen wrench to turn it until it clicks into place. After you feel it click, it should look just like this. Now that you have the barrel assembly back together, put it back on the upper receiver just like this and push it down until you feel it lock. As long as the barrel is locked securely into place, this little part right here should push right in and be flush with the outside of the receiver. Now put these screws back in, and if you want to put blue Loctite on them before you reinstall them, feel free to do so. Sig Sauer does not address this in the manual one way or the other. Now remember when I mentioned these rods have different ends, they're not the same on both sides, so you got to remember which side is which, and if you have it correctly, it should go in just like that and lock into place. It's actually easier to do if you do it without the carriage assembly attached. So push it down on the table, push the springs down, then reinstall the spring plate. And this is how the op rod goes back onto the bolt carrier. You'll have to put the charging handle in first before you put the carriage assembly back in. Once you do, the carriage assembly is going to slide right in. Snap it in place and make sure the back of the spring plate is flush with the back of the receiver. If it's not, that means there's something wrong with your recoil springs. You'll have to take the springs back out and make sure you have everything installed correctly. As long as that spring plate is flush, you should have no problems closing the upper down onto the lower receiver. Now go over to the right side and push the takedown pin back in. Time to function check. Pull the trigger, you should feel the hammer drop. Pull the charging handle back while still holding the trigger. Release the trigger, pull it again. You should feel and hear the hammer drop again. If it does, you're good to go. If you found this video even the least bit helpful, give it a thumbs up and buy something from us at skullcrush.com.